The battlefield was quiet now, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the heavy silence that came after death. Smoke curled into the sky like black ribbons, and the ground was broken by craters and fire. Broken machines lay scattered across the land, their metal twisted and glowing from heat. The air smelled of ash, burned oil, and blood. In the middle of this ruined place stood a single human soldier. His name was Marcus Hale. His armor was cracked and burned, his weapon heavy in his tired hands. He had survived when so many others had not. Around him, the corpses of friend and foe alike told the story of a battle that had no winners, only survivors. Across the field, a figure moved through the haze. She was tall, her body covered in natural armor that shimmered faintly in the smoke. Her crown of bone spikes caught the faint light, and her eyes glowed like embers in the dark. She was the alien queen of the Zareth, the enemy leader, the one every human soldier was told to fear. Her people called her Xylera. To them, she was more than a queen. She was a symbol of power, of survival, of a race that refused to bend to humanity's reach. Every soldier followed her with blind loyalty, for she carried herself like a goddess of war. Now, she walked toward Marcus, each step heavy and echoing in the silence. The ground seemed to tremble beneath her, and her shadow stretched long across the ashes. Marcus lifted his weapon at first, instinct demanding he fight. But his arms shook, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He had fought for hours, for days, for years. His entire life since the war began had been battle after battle. His friends had died beside him, his family was gone. His world had been scarred by endless conflict, and standing before him was the one he should hate most. Yet instead of raising his weapon fully, Marcus lowered it. He let the barrel point to the ground. His voice came out hoarse, weak, but steady. "Enough," he said. "No more killing." The queen stopped, her head tilted slightly as if she had not heard him right. Her claws tightened around the staff she carried, and her glowing eyes narrowed. "You would beg for mercy, human?" Her voice was low, cold, and yet strangely calm. It was the voice of a ruler who had commanded armies, a voice used to obedience. Marcus did not flinch. He did not look away from her gaze. "I'm not begging," he said softly. "I'm tired of this war, tired of watching both our people die." The words hung in the air between them, fragile yet sharp. The queen studied him in silence. She had seen many humans before, but always in armor, always as faceless enemies who shouted and fought until their last breath. They never lowered their weapons. They never stood still before her. This one was different. His armor was broken, yet he stood tall. His voice was weary, yet it carried strength. His eyes did not plead, but neither did they burn with hatred. They were steady, calm, and strangely human. Xylera felt a strange twist inside her chest, something she could not name. She wanted to call it weakness, but it did not feel weak. The wind blew across the battlefield, carrying with it the faint cries of the dying in the distance. For a long moment, the human and the alien queen stared at each other. Two leaders, two survivors, both covered in scars of a war that had taken everything from them. Marcus lowered his weapon completely and let it fall with a dull thud to the ground. His arms hung at his sides, empty. He stood unarmed before her, ready for whatever would come. "If you want to kill me," he said quietly, "then do it, but I won't fight anymore." The queen's claws tightened again, but she did not move. She could have struck him down in an instant. She could have ended his life as easily as breathing. But instead, she found herself frozen, staring at the man who dared to face her with nothing but his words. For the first time in many years, the alien queen hesitated, and in that hesitation, the first spark of something greater than war was born. The queen's eyes glowed faintly as she studied the man before her. His words still echoed in her mind. No more killing. No human had ever spoken to her like that. They screamed, they cursed, they fought with burning rage until they fell. But this one, he stood calm, even though he was broken and tired. His name was Marcus Hale, He was not the strongest soldier, not the most famous, but he carried something more powerful than raw strength. He carried endurance. Every scar on his body was a story of survival. Every breath he still drew was proof that his spirit had not shattered, even when everything around him had burned. The queen's claws tightened on her staff as she looked closer at him. His armor was dented and scorched but still clinging to his body. His helmet was cracked, the visor smeared with soot. Beneath the armor she could see faint traces of blood where plasma fire had nearly ended him. Her people had always told her humans were heartless machines hidden inside their shells of steel. But as she watched him sway slightly from exhaustion, she saw the truth. This was not a machine. This was a man who carried pain on his shoulders and still chose to stand. Marcus breathed heavily, each inhale rough, but his voice was steady when he spoke again. "I didn't survive this long because I wanted to kill," he said. "I survived because I wanted to protect my friends, my people, even the chance of a better future." The queen's crown of bone gleamed faintly in the firelight. She took a step closer, her presence towering, her shadow falling over him. "You protect," she hissed, her voice sharp like a blade. "But you slaughter my kind without thought. You burn our nests. You leave our young in ashes. That is not protection. That is war." Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment. He remembered the battles, the flames, the screams. He had seen Zareth children crushed in the chaos, their voices silenced under collapsing walls. He had seen soldiers, on both sides, throw away mercy for victory. His chest tightened with the weight of those memories. "You're right," he whispered. "War makes monsters of us all." The queen froze at his answer. She had expected denial. She had expected him to defend humanity with arrogance and pride, but instead he admitted the truth. Marcus lifted his head again, meeting her burning gaze. "But I don't want to be that monster anymore. Not today. Not here." His words pressed against her chest like a weight. Xylira, the queen of the Zareth, had been raised to believe humans were incapable of such thoughts. To her people, humans were unfeeling invaders, incapable of regret. Yet here stood one who admitted guilt, one who carried sorrow like it was part of his soul. The wind whistled faintly through the broken machines around them. The fire crackled, and the ground still radiated heat. It felt as though the entire battlefield was holding its breath. Marcus steadied himself, though his body begged to fall. He gripped the edge of his chest plate, the cracked armor biting into his hand. His voice grew firmer, no longer just tired, but filled with quiet resolve. "I am not your enemy," he said. "I'm just a man who wants this to end. If there's even the smallest chance to stop the killing, I'll take it. Even if it means standing here unarmed before you." The queen's breath caught. She had heard countless speeches of bravery from her warriors, but those were always loud, filled with pride and fury. His words were quiet, stripped of glory, yet stronger than any battle cry. Her claws trembled slightly around her weapon. She wanted to strike him, to silence the strange ache in her chest. But she could not move. For the first time in her reign, she felt doubt about everything she had been told, everything she had believed. The silence stretched between them. The human and the alien queen, enemies by blood, now stood in the heart of ruin with only words between them. And in Marcus's steady eyes, she saw no hate, only resolve, only the reflection of someone who had suffered, yet still hoped. Xylira turned her gaze away for just a moment, hiding the storm inside her. But she knew one truth already. This soldier was different, and his words would haunt her long after the battlefield turned cold. Queen Xylira stood tall, her crown of bone spikes glinting faintly in the glow of burning wreckage. To her people, she was the symbol of strength, the unshakable heart of the Zareth. Since the day she had taken the crown, she had been taught to bury weakness, to silence fear, and to wear power like armor. But now, as she faced the broken human soldier, cracks began to form in that armor, not in the bone upon her head, but deep inside her chest. His words would not leave her mind. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just a man who wants this to end. She clenched her claws tightly, digging into the shaft of her staff until the hardened surface creaked. This should have been easy. The human had dropped his weapon. He stood unguarded, his body trembling. With exhaustion. A simple strike would finish him, and with his death her people would cheer her name. They would call her merciful for ending him quickly, or glorious for taking his head as a prize. Yet she did not move. Instead, she found herself staring at his face. His visor was cracked, revealing eyes that were not wild with rage or frozen, with fear, but steady, too steady. They looked at her not as an enemy, not as a monster, but as something else. Celira's mind betrayed her. Against her will, she remembered the faces of her own fallen, warriors who had sworn loyalty to her, brothers and sisters of the brood who had died with her name on their lips. She remembered the wounded carried from the battlefield, their cries echoing through the halls of her war castle. She had forced herself to ignore those sounds, to bury them under the weight of duty. But now the human's words had torn open the cage where those voices had been locked. The throne room felt like a battlefield without weapons. The silence was heavy, pressing on both of them like a weight neither could escape. The queen stood tall, her crown flickering weakly, her silver eyes fixed on the human who would not bow. Daniel Hayes knelt in chains, but his spirit stood higher than any wall she had built around herself. His words had struck her deeper than blades, and now she felt herself standing at the edge of something she had never faced. Doubt. She turned, away, her cloak whispering across the floor as she walked back to her throne, her claws pressed against the armrests, leaving scratches on the black iron. Her voice was sharp, but not steady. If I free you, my people will see weakness. The Council of Warlords will not forgive me. They will call for my death. They will destroy me, and the war will continue without me. Daniel lifted his head. His wrists were raw, blood seeping where the chains had cut into his skin, but his voice was calm. Then maybe you need to show them what real strength looks like. Not in burning more worlds, not in spilling more blood, but in ending it. The queen turned her face slightly, her silver eyes glimmering with something between anger and sorrow. You think ending a war is strength? It is surrender. My people will not accept it. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, it is not surrender. It is courage. You've lived longer than any human ever could. You've seen what war does. You already know where this leads. It's just death and ashes. But peace, that takes more courage than any blade. And you're the only one who can make that choice. Her chest tightened. His words echoed in her mind, mixing with memories she had buried deep. She saw again the face of the other Hayes, the man she had slain long ago. His eyes had carried the same fire, his words the same weight. You can kill me, but you cannot kill what I stand for. She had thought his death silenced him, but here he was, alive again in this soldier's voice. The queen clenched her claws into the iron, her voice breaking. Do you not understand? I am their queen. I am their god. I cannot change without breaking everything that holds my people together. Daniel's reply was steady, soft, but powerful. Then break it. Break it so something better can be built. Maybe that's why my ancestor faced you. Maybe that's why I'm here now, to show you that even gods can change. The words struck like lightning. For the first time, she felt her crown heavy on her head, like chains she had chosen for herself. She had ruled for so long with fear, but what had it truly given her? Endless war, endless silence, and the memory of one man's defiance haunting her through centuries. Her breath shook. She looked at Daniel again. His eyes were tired, his body weak, but his spirit was unbroken. He carried the weight of generations, and still he stood defiant. Why you? She whispered, almost to herself. Why? Does your kind always rise even when crushed? Why do you carry hope when hope should be impossible? Daniel's lips curled into the faintest smile, though his voice was raw. Because that's who we are. You can chain us, you can burn us, you can even kill us, but you'll never kill the fire. We rise, Always. The queen's crown flickered brighter for a moment, then dimmed again, as if torn between two worlds. Her claws released the throne, her body trembling. "If I choose peace," she whispered, "then I choose to scar my own people. I choose to stand alone." Daniel leaned forward, his voice strong despite the pain in his body. "No, you won't be alone. You'll stand with me. You'll stand with humanity. And together, maybe we can show the stars something greater than war." Her eyes widened slightly. The words carried weight. They carried truth. And they carried the same fire that had once scarred her soul. Her heart pounded in her chest. For centuries she had been unshakable, untouchable. But now, she stood at the breaking point, and with a shuddering breath, the alien queen realized that her choice, her next words, would change the course of history. The great doors of the throne room creaked as the guards stood waiting outside, unaware that history trembled within. Inside, silence ruled. The alien queen stood frozen at the edge of her throne, her crown dimming and flickering like a flame caught in the wind. Daniel Hayes knelt in his chains, his body weak, but his eyes steady and alive with fire. The queen's breath came slow, heavy with centuries of weight. She had fought countless battles, conquered dozens of worlds, crushed rebellions with a single command. Yet nothing had ever shaken her as much as the name of this human soldier, Hayes. That name was a scar she had never healed from, a reminder of a man who had once stood in her way. And now another Hayes had come, not with fire, not with an army, but with words, with hope. Her claws trembled against the iron of her throne. Her voice cracked as she spoke, no longer the voice of an unbreakable ruler, but of someone standing at the edge of choice. "If I free you, I betray everything I have built. My warlords will see it as weakness. They will rise against me. I may lose my throne, I may lose everything." Daniel lifted his head. His wrists were bleeding from the chains, but his voice was steady. "Then maybe losing everything is the price of building something better." The queen stared at him, her silver eyes glimmering. For a long moment she said nothing. The chamber was still, the only sound the faint hum of the crystals on the walls. Then, slowly she raised one hand. The air shimmered with alien energy. Daniel felt the chains around his wrists loosen, then fall away with a sharp clatter against the floor. He looked down at his freed hands, then back up at her in disbelief. The queen's voice carried through the hall, soft but powerful. "Your name has defeated me twice, human. Once with fire, long ago, and now, with hope. Perhaps this is the greater wound." The doors of the throne room opened suddenly as the guards rushed in, their eyes wide as they saw the human standing unbound beside their queen. Weapons were raised, confusion thick in the air. But the queen raised her hand, her voice ringing out like thunder. "Stop." The guards froze instantly, the echo of her command bouncing across the crystal walls. Her tall figure straightened, her cloak flowing behind her as she stepped down from the throne. She placed herself at Daniel's side, towering above him, yet no longer looking down on him. Her voice carried so all who had gathered could hear. "This war ends. From this moment, the blood between us is broken. No more worlds shall burn. No more chains shall bind." Gasps spread through the chamber. The guards looked at one another in disbelief. To them, the queen was eternal, a goddess of war. And yet here she stood, ending what had been built through centuries of conquest. Daniel felt his chest tighten as he looked at her. She was still their queen, still fierce and terrifying, but now there was something else in her, something almost human. The queen turned her silver gaze to him one last time. "Daniel Hayes, your ancestors scarred me with fire. But you—" Her voice softened. "You have scarred me with mercy, and I will remember this wound for the rest of my days." Daniel swallowed hard. His voice shook, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. "Then let this scar remind you what humanity stands for. We fall, we bleed, but we rise. Always." The queen's head lowered slightly, not in defeat, but in respect. For the first time in centuries, she bowed, even if only for a heartbeat. The hall was silent, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of change, a silence that came before something new. Daniel Hayes, a single soldier, had walked into the heart of his enemy's empire in chains, and with nothing but his name and his unbroken spirit, he had bent history. The alien queen had lived for centuries, but it was this moment, this human, this name, that would mark her forever. And as the stars watched, the legacy of Hayes lived on, not in fire, but in hope. Daniel's chest rose and fell quickly. His mind tried to imagine this man, his ancestor perhaps, standing where he now stood. It felt unreal, yet the way she spoke made it impossible to doubt. Her voice cracked, the first true break in centuries of control. I killed him with my own hands. I ended his life. And yet, she paused, her eyes closing for a moment. He has never left me. His defiance scarred me deeper than any blade. His memory followed me through centuries of war. Even now, I see his face when I close my eyes. Daniel's throat tightened. His father's words echoed again. Our name is heavier than it looks. Now he understood. His family carried not just pride, but history. Blood spilled in battles humanity had never recorded, battles against monsters who now stood before him. You killed him, Daniel said at last, his voice hard, but his eyes steady. The queen opened her eyes. Her silver gaze met his, and for a moment they stood like two shadows bound by the same ghost. Yes, she whispered, but in killing him, I failed to erase him, and now you stand here. His blood, his fire, his name, they still live. Daniel felt his hands tremble in the chains, not from fear, but from something else. Anger, pride, and something deeper. He realized now that this was more than just his story. It was a story of all humans, a story of standing tall even when the universe itself tried to break them. Do you know what he told me before the end? The queen asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. Daniel shook his head. Her silver eyes glistened, the faintest hint of pain breaking through. He said, You can kill me, but you cannot kill what I stand for. Humanity will rise again, and again, until even the stars remember us. The words struck Daniel like fire in his chest. His ancestor had spoken not just for himself, but for every human who would come after him. And now here he was, carrying that torch in chains. The hall fell silent again. Daniel straightened his back, his voice steady, though his heart burned with emotion. Then know this. Hayes didn't fall with him. Hayes stands here even now. You can chain me, you can break me, but you'll never silence the fire in our name. The queen's crown flickered weakly, her claws trembling against the iron of her throne. She had faced countless enemies, destroyed countless worlds, yet, in this single human's voice, she felt something she could not conquer. For the first time in her endless reign, the alien queen felt the weight of defeat, not from weapons, not from armies, but from memory and from hope. And Daniel Hayes, bound and bruised, realized that he was no longer alone. He carried ghosts with him. He carried a legacy. The throne room was silent, the air heavy with memory. The queen's words still hung between them, like ghosts refusing to leave. Daniel's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths, but his eyes never lowered. Even in chains, even on his knees, he stood tall in spirit. You killed him, Daniel repeated, his voice steady, though his heart beat like war drums inside him. Yes. The queen's tone was sharp, but broken, like glass beneath weight. I killed him, yet his courage has haunted me longer than my victories have comforted me. For centuries his fire lived in my mind. Her silver eyes dimmed as she looked down at him. And now you stand before me, his blood, his name. I see the same fire. Tell me, human, do you hate me? Daniel's throat tightened. Hate. The word burned in his chest. But when he thought of his ancestor's last words, the belief that humanity would rise again, he realized hate was too small for what he carried. Slowly, he shook his head. "No, I don't hate you." The queen frowned, her claws tightening on the throne. "You should. I killed your kin. I burned your world's hope. I have taken everything from your kind." Daniel's voice grew firmer. "Hate is easy. Hate is what keeps wars alive. What I want is for this war to end." The queen froze again. No prisoner had ever spoken to her like this. No soldier had ever dared to speak of peace to her face. Her kind respected strength, not mercy. Yet this fragile human, bruised and bound, spoke with the courage of a king. "You think peace is simple?" she asked bitterly, her cloak whispering as she moved. "Peace costs more than blood. Peace demands sacrifice and courage that even kings have not shown." Daniel lifted his chained hands, the metal biting into his skin. His wrists were raw, but his voice was strong. "Then let me tell you something about humans. We pay the cost. We always have. We suffer. We bleed. We bury our dead, but still we rise. Because without peace, without hope, all this blood means nothing." The queen's chest rose and fell quickly. For the first time in centuries, she felt unsure. Her throne had always been built on certainty, on knowing she was stronger, faster, more powerful than her enemies. But this soldier, this human, did not speak with the voice of a prisoner. He spoke like his ancestor had spoken. He carried fire in his words. Her crown flickered faintly. "If I free you, my council will call me weak. The warlords who follow me will see weakness and they will tear me down." Daniel's dark eyes met hers. His voice did not waver. "Then stand with me. Stand with us. You've lived long enough to see where war leads. Ashes, bones, silence. But peace? Peace takes real courage. You already know this. That's why my ancestor scarred you. Not because he fought you, but because he made you feel what peace could mean." Her claws trembled against the iron throne. She saw in him not just the boy in chains, but the echo of the man she had killed, the man who had faced her without fear. It was as if the same soul stood before her again, demanding that she choose. "Why do your kind always carry hope, even when hope is madness?" she whispered, her voice raw, stripped of pride. Daniel's lips curled in the faintest smile, though his face was worn with exhaustion. "Because without hope we're nothing. And humans? We don't do nothing." The queen's silver eyes widened slightly. For so long she had believed humans weak, yet here he was teaching her that weakness and strength were not always what they seemed. Daniel straightened his back, even in chains, and his voice filled the hall. "You said my ancestor scarred you, with fire. Then let me scar you with hope. End this war. Prove that even a queen can choose something greater." The hall was silent again, but this silence was different. It was not empty. It was heavy, alive with the weight of choice. For the first time in her reign, the alien queen felt the burden of a decision not made with weapons, but with her heart. And Daniel Hayes, chained but unbroken, waited for her answer. The Bauer throne room no longer felt like a place of victory. The air was heavy, pressing down on both of them. The queen stood tall, yet her spirit trembled. The human's words lingered in her mind, words that no warrior, no rival, no enemy had ever dared to speak. "Scar me with hope," she whispered to herself, her voice low, almost trembling. Her crown flickered weakly. The crystals that had once burned like fire now pulsed faintly, as though her power itself had dimmed. She turned away from Daniel, her cloak flowing across the floor. For centuries she had been a symbol of strength, of control. Her people worshipped her because they believed she could not be broken. But now, in the silence of her throne room, she felt fragile. Her steps echoed softly as she walked to the edge of the platform. Her gaze lifted to the great windows that looked out into the endless stars. She had conquered dozens of worlds, silenced countless voices. Yet the memory of one man, one haze, had followed her like a shadow she could not escape. And now, here was another haze, alive before her, carrying the same fire. Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. You don't want this war anymore, do you? The queen stiffened. She did not turn to face him. A queen cannot want. A queen can only rule. Daniel shook his head, his chains rattling. That's not true. You've lived longer than any of us. You've seen more than we can imagine. You know this war leads nowhere. You don't have to keep playing their game. Her hands tightened into fists, claws scraping against the railing. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was just a human, a fragile thing that could never understand the weight of her crown, but she couldn't. His words struck too close to the truth she had buried for years. Slowly, she turned back toward him. Her silver eyes no longer looked like blades. They looked tired. Do you think I am not afraid? Do you think I do not dream of ending it? Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. But if I bend, if I show weakness, my people will see it. My council will rise against me. They will not allow me to end the war. They will kill me for it. Daniel lifted his chin, his gaze locked on hers. Then maybe they need to see their queen not as a weapon, but as something greater. Not fear, not fire, but courage. Her chest ached at his words. Courage. That same word spoken so long ago by the man she killed. She remembered his eyes, burning even as he fell. And now, this Daniel Hayes spoke with the same fire. She closed her eyes for a moment, her voice breaking. I have slaughtered billions, human. Entire worlds turned to silence because of me. Do you think hope can survive such blood? Daniel's reply was soft, but strong. Hope survives everything. That's why it's hope. The queen's breath shuddered. For centuries she had built walls around her heart, armor that no weapon could pierce. But here, in this hall, before this human, she felt the cracks spreading. His words did not break her crown, but they broke the silence inside her, the silence she had carried too long.